Hello, my name is Michelle Royer, and I'm Head of Community Services at the Lucy Robbins Wells Library. And today I have with me Dan Balboni of Balboni Custom Jewelers. And today we're going to talk about the do's and don'ts of jewelry appraisal. Dan, thanks for coming today. How are you?
Very well. Thank you for inviting me, Michelle.
All right. Well, today we're going to ask you some questions. A lot of people are interested about this topic, and so I've been able to get some great questions. So first of all, just so we have a little background, how did you get into the jewelry business, and how long have you been doing it?
Good question. I actually got into the jewelry business by accident years ago. I happened to be working in a different line of business altogether. I was actually working in a health club, and I was signing up a member, showing him how to use the equipment. He liked my whole approach, and basically what he said is, I really like your approach and I like the way you talk and handle yourself. I'm a jeweler. And he said to me, he said, I want to talk to you at some point. He said, because I think at some point I would like to hire you. And that was the very beginning of my career. And that was 30 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So what did you have to do for education to get in the business that you're in now?
Well, it didn't require any education to get into the business. The education that I received was out of a desire to not be ignorant of the business that I was in. I mean, the jeweler that hired me brought me into the business, and he gave me the very basics of it. But he was more of a bench jeweler than anything else. He didn't have any particular educational requirements or anything like that, or any certifications other than being as a bench jeweler. And so because of the fact that he wanted to put me basically into a management position running a store for him, I did not feel comfortable not having the knowledge about gemstones and jewelry. So what I did is I did my own research. And that's how I found out about the Gemological Institute of America, which is where I went to school. At that time, that was up in Santa Monica, California. Okay. And so I did my research on it, and I saw all the different opportunities and all the different courses that you could take through them. And I thought to myself, well, if I'm going to get in this business, I'm going for the top. I'm going for the gusto, the highest designation I can get, which is a graduate gemologist. So that's how I found out about that. That's how I got my education and training through them. And that's brought me to where I am today.
So when you talk about appraising jewelry, like what is that? How do you know? Why do people need that? And
well, they need. It's very important. Actually, in the appraisal end of it is actually there's another part of the education that I had to get in order to become an appraiser. And that is through the ISA, which is the International Society of Appraisers, which is the organization that I went to school for. I did the same homework that I did for becoming a graduate gemologist. I was working for somebody that wanted to teach me how to do appraisals. And at that time, because I had the gemological knowledge and she was showing me how to do these appraisals, I felt that there was something wrong, something missing. I wasn't quite sure what it was that I didn't know and that I felt needed to be in the appraisal that was not in there. So I did some research. And like I said, I came across all the different schools that offered appraising, personal property appraising. And of course, I went for the gusto on that one. And I picked out the one that was rated at that time as the highest and the most respected school, which is the International Society of Appraisers. So I signed up for that, and I took their educational courses because basically, in a nutshell, appraising, and this is basically, I'm a personal property appraiser. My specialty is in gemstones and jewelry, all right? So there is what we do as appraisers, we use research and methodology to determine the value of an item. And so that kind of distinguishes and gives you the roots to be able to figure out, well, what is the methodology to determine value? Because it's not cut and dried the way most people think it is, because you're not used to having an actual personal property appraiser doing your jewelry appraisals. You're used to having a jeweler do your appraisals.
So any jeweler could do an appraisal, but it would just be based on the knowledge that jeweler has?
Yes. So to continue on with that, your thought is absolutely right. Any jeweler can do an appraisal. As a matter of fact, which is going to be surprising to you, not only can any jeweler do an appraisal, because you don't need the formal education and training, and I'm going to get into that in a second. So what I was going to attach onto that is that a jeweler he could hire you today to come to work in his store, and he could actually sit down and say to you, I want you to appraise this item of jewelry for me. I just want you to do these couple of things for me, do this, and write up that report for me. And this is the value I want you to put on it, okay? And let you do that. That is the biggest issue in the industry that I am in today. That brings up a lot of questions, because in the jewelry industry, there is no regulation when it comes to appraisals. Unfortunately, that's not a good thing. All right. And that was the reason why I thought there was something wrong way back when I was being trained on it. And something told me that I had to go further on this, because basically, and this is not to condemn anybody. This is not to say anything bad, because this is the way things had been done years from as far back as jewelry making goes. There was, at one point in time, there was no formal education and training in appraisal theory and methodology. So what ended up happening is because as if you were to compare personal property appraising with real estate, okay, real estate appraising, they have a set standard to go by, that they're regulated in that industry with real estate appraising to come up with using proper procedures and methodology to arrive at a value. Okay, and that's what my school patterned itself after, was the real estate appraising. And so because they have regulations, we don't, because stop and think about it, real estate market as far as values of homes and commercial buildings, as opposed to the average piece of jewelry and things like that, no comparison in prices, values and things like that. So that's why there was no importance placed on that. So what ends up happening is anybody can do that appraisal. Like I said, you could do the appraisal, all right? Doesn't mean you're correct, because I can tell you, you're going to be wrong. So what ends up happening is when you go through that traditional appraisal, where a jeweler gives you an appraisal, basically what they're doing in a nutshell, and this is based on my own personal experience of being in this business for 30 years. This is not just me saying this, because I'm not trying to condemn anybody for what they do, because a lot of them don't know that there's certain guidelines to go by. So what ends up happening is they'll look at a piece of jewelry. They'll look at it. They'll be able to make that description of that item, and even be able. Some of them can even grade the stones like a gemologist and so forth. And they can write out that report. And basically, what they're going to do is they're going to write out a description of that item. Typically, you're going to get, for a single item, a one-page appraisal. All right. So you might have a paragraph that describes that item, and some might even include in it what we call a plot, which if it's like, say there's a major diamond, a big center diamond and a diamond ring, say, for example, that's where the gemological side comes in, where they can actually go in there, grade that diamond, and draw this plot where all the grade setting inclusions are. That's another subject altogether, which we're not going to get into, but they can put that into that report. Now comes time to determine the value on it. What do they have to go by? Well, typically what most of them are going to do, and again, not all, but most of them are going to do, they're going to look at it and they're going to say, if I had this diamond ring in my store, this is what I would sell it for. So that they put that down into the report. Well, there's one thing wrong with that, something major that's wrong with that. That's a price, because that's what they would sell it to you for. All right, that's a price. Value is determined by, as I mentioned earlier, research and methodology. What I have to do when somebody gives me that item, first of all, I'm going to examine the piece itself, the physical characteristics of it. I'm going to look at, as far as the quality of the construction of the item. And I'm also going to look in there for some key components that not all pieces of jewelry have them. Some do, some don't. But first of all, I'm going to look at, for example, let's say it's a yellow gold diamond engagement ring. All right. First of all, I want to see, did they put the quality mark in there? Let's say 14 karat, 18 karat. Is that stamp in there? A lot of times it is. Sometimes it's not. Okay. The other things that I'm going to look for is to see if there's a maker's mark in that. And what I mean by that, who manufactured it? A lot of the manufacturers have their own little mark that they stamp inside of that piece of jewelry. I'm looking for that too. And if I see it, if I see that in there, now what I do is I research that and find out who stamped that is in there. And when I see that, that tells me, that's going to guide me to my starting point now. It's going to bring me to the point, okay, looking up this, researching this maker's mark now I have to do, because I have to determine what level in the retail market does this item sell in. And basically the best example that I always give when I explain this to people is that you take the simple, the most basic and most well-known ring, okay? What we call the diamond solitaire, what a lot of people are familiar with, which is called a Tiffany setting. All right, and basically what that is, it's a yellow gold shank with a 6-prong white gold head, which is the part that holds the diamond in place. All right, okay, that holds the diamond in place. And the reason it's called a Tiffany style setting is because Tiffany, back in the day, they are the ones that came up with this style of ring. And it is still to this day one of the most popular of all time. So you take that item, all right, now you can have 2 Tiffany's. Okay, I'll do that. I don't like doing that, but I'll do that little quote. That's the Tiffany style engagement ring. One of them could be from Tiffany. Another one that looks just like it could come from your local jeweler. Okay, something that a little mom and pop or even a jewelry chain might carry that same item. Similar, not exactly, but similar again. All right, so what I'm looking for now, if I can determine, and a lot of times I can determine it even sometimes when a stamp is not there, I can determine it based on the quality and the way the item is constructed and the metal content and so forth. Find a starting place. So if I have these 2 diamond rings that look alike, and I know that one of them came from Tiffany and the other one looks like it came from the jeweler down the street, whoever that might be, okay, again, and I'm not making any judgments here about anything. This is helping me to determine where we start on this. Mm-hmm. You describe those 2, and let's just say that both of those had, okay, they're both the Tiffany style setting. They both have, we'll just say, around 1 carat diamond in them. Let's say that those 2 diamonds are the exact same quality. They're the same shape, they're the same carat weight, they're the same, they have the same clarity grade, and they have the same color grade. And again, that's a gemological thing. We can get into that at another time. But it's just that I'm trying to make this point. Both of them exactly the same. Those 2 items are going to have a completely different value. And the reason for that is because if one of those came from your local jeweler, whether they be in the mall or whether they're an independent, whatever the case may be, you'll find that I look for that research and the methodology again applied to it is going to help me determine that one that doesn't have that Tiffany mark in it, all right? That's going to determine the level that it sells at. But because the other one is Tiffany, that one, everything is equal. Quality, diamonds, settings, great. But one comes from Tiffany, that one has provenance or importance because of the fact that that is from an old world-time jeweler, one that has a fantastic reputation around the world. They've been around for a long time and they are known for quality, and their items, because of the quality, et cetera, and the name that they've built for themselves, they sell at high prices. Let's just face it, all right? So now I have these 2 items that look exactly the same. Let's just say that first ring, that's not a Tiffany ring, let's just say that the value on that ring came out to be, say, $6,000. That Tiffany one could be as much as twice as much of that, just because of that provenance, that importance. That distinguishes you that the Tiffany market level up here and that other level is here, okay? And that's what an appraiser needs to find out, because that helps determine and drive the difference between the value of one over the other. And just being that, if somebody doesn't have that education and training on how to look at things this way, items of jewelry this way, they're going to be off the mark. The bottom line is the reason why this is so important. Again, we went back, there's no regulation. Anybody can do this. So why not just let Joe Jeweler do it or whatever the case may be? Here is the most critical part of this. And this is something that your audience needs to understand. That appraisal is a legal document. That appraisal must be able to stand up in a court of law. What happens now? Both those items, okay? The customer came in to have them insured, all right? Then all of a sudden there's a loss or a tremendous damage. And let's just say that it's a high value item, okay? Very expensive ring, let's say. Now there's a dispute between the insurance company and this appraisal that was done. They don't agree, and they say that, well, we can replace this for much less than that. We are not going to give you the money for that. We're going to let you go out and replace it, but you're going to have to go with the figure that we're giving you now, which is way below what this appraisal was at. So now you have this dispute. Okay, now you have this dispute. It goes to court. Okay, a sharp prosecuting attorney is going to call the jeweler into the courtroom, put him on the stand. First question that they're going to, probably one of the very first questions they're going to ask is, how did you arrive at that value? Okay, so what's he going to say? What did I say earlier? If I had this item in my store, this is what I would sell it for. And that is going to be the end of the case right there. Okay, it's done. The insurance company, if they denied that claim for that high amount of money, because you priced that, valued that at what you would sell it for, and you don't know what the market level is, what level it's at, and where it's selling, not going to honor that claim. So that's the reason why when I do an appraisal, I have to document everything, and I have to explain in that appraisal how I arrived at my value. Okay, all of the things that I did, I have to describe everything. And there's a lot of different parts that go into an appraisal. So this is the reason why all of this is so important. There's many components that go into my appraisal that you're not going to get in a typical appraisal.
So when people appraise jewelry, do they come in with one piece and you just start there? Or do people come in with like 15 pieces? Like, how does that usually? Well,
I'll tell you the way that I work it as a personal property appraiser. A lot of, because they can come in with one item, they can come in with many items. It doesn't matter. I know that a lot of times, again, based on past experience, working in other jewelry stores, seeing what was going on there and how things were done, typically, which was very common when somebody comes in with several items of jewelry, basically, the more items they have, the more the jeweler is going to discount each item, charging them per item, all right? So that's one way that they do it. But they're going to do that same simple appraisal on that, but include all of those items in there. Myself, again, it's based on research and methodology. So I'm basing all mine, I'm not doing it per item, I'm doing it per hour. However, when somebody brings an aggregate or they bring a bunch of items in together, you know, when I do the process, examine all of those things, because I have them, the way that I work it is I actually do mine in two phases, two real complete separate phases. And what I mean by that is I'll set up the appointment with somebody to come in, and whether they have one item or let's just say they have 10 items. If they have one item, I let them sit there, one or two items. I'll examine those pieces of jewelry. I'm taking all my notes. I'm putting it under the microscope, examining the gemstones. I'm looking for the maker's marks, the stamps, the quality mark. I've got all these sheets that I write these notes on. Then when I'm done with that, I hand the item back to the customer and they leave. Mm-hmm. That's the first phase. Now there's going to be a second phase to this. And that second phase is, as I go about my week, what I'm going to do now is, now that I have all my notes, now I'm going to put all this together and I am going to look at, based on the information that I have to start researching the market now. What market level does each one of these items come in? Okay, where are they falling in the marketplace out there? Can I tell that they're a high end or a moderate end or a low end jewelry store? Whatever, because a lot of it is I have to ask a lot of questions of the customer when they come in. You know, where did you get this piece? How long have you had it? And it's not that I'm trying to extract information that, okay, oh, you bought it from that jeweler, and then say something bad about the jeweler. And that's not what that's about. The more questions that I ask, the more answers that I get from them. When did you buy it? Where did you buy it? Was it from here? Is it, you know, did you buy it in Europe, say, for example? And a lot of that you can tell by a piece anyway when you look at them, or wherever, different parts of the world. But if it's from a different part of the country, or where, how long have you had it? Where did you get it? Et cetera, et cetera. All of these things come into play in helping me narrow down the amount of work that I have to do. The more questions they can add. Here's the other thing that a lot of people are resistant to this. And this just happened to me again recently. It happens to me a lot. And I can actually broke it down to the customer and help them understand why this was so important. And I said, she had several items. She brought them in, okay? And I had said to her, if you have any documentation, do you have the receipts? Do you have any previous appraisals on these? Bring those in, okay? All of these, the reason why I'm asking for this is because this can help me narrow down the amount of time that it can help me start off ahead. Instead of starting from ground zero on this, I can have some information and I can start, okay, I can go up now. I've already got some ideas from this right here and I know where to start looking now. So that cuts down on the amount of time. That's why this is important. The other thing is the items that she brought in, she brought the appraisals in, she crossed everything out, the jeweler's name, crossed out the value that they arrived at, et cetera, all this stuff out. And I looked at it and I said to her, I said, why did you, cross everything out? And she said, well, I don't want to bias your opinion on this. Great, I understand that. I said, however, what you just did now is you set me back. And what I mean by that is, I don't care who it came from. That information is very important for me because that, where you got it, when you got it, even the price that you paid. And again, to me right now, looking at this is the price. That's all it is. It's not a value, it's a price. And I'm not going to say that it's wrong because it could be right. All right. Mm-hmm. So I'm using this information, all right, to establish, okay, I know who that jeweler is. I know what level in the marketplace they are. You just saved yourself some money, okay? Because if you hold things back from me, I have to do more work. And guess what? Like I said, I charge by the hour because there's a lot of work that's involved in this. And so you saved yourself a lot of time. You saved yourself some money. That's why this is very important. You're not going to bias me. You're helping me. You're helping me and you're helping yourself. This is very, very important. So to get onto that other end of it, if there's lots of items, I give my customer a choice. And again, everybody has different comfort levels. If you have a lot of them, obviously, you're not going to sit here all day long with me to examine all these pieces of jewelry. You are going to have enough trust in me to leave these items with me. And if you are uncomfortable with that and you can't do that, then I suggest that we do several appointments along the way and you bring them in 1 or 2 items at a time. But this, it's very important, again, because when there's a lot, I can't have them sit here all day because I don't work on one appraisal all day long. I have other areas of my business that I work in too. So everything is done in phases, but everything is done methodically. Okay, it's all laid out. It's done methodically through research. And that's the big, big difference between myself and the typical jeweler that does. And again, this is not putting anybody down. This is where I got these are my specialty areas. And I did this training for this. And there's a reason for all this. And like I said, it comes back down to that one thing. The appraisal is a legal document.
So when you're deciding to do an appraisal, like what are some of the things a person is looking for as opposed to like the do's and the don'ts? Do you have any advice?
Okay, yes, I have that's a very good question and I'll run down that for you right now, Michelle. That's great. Okay, there's minimum requirements that should actually go into the appraisal. One of them is, okay, like I said, my reports are not 1 page long. The first thing is there's a cover page, and that that cover page, you know, yes, it includes the typical things like the customer's name, their address, all of that information. And then you have a cover letter that goes along with that. And that cover letter gives you a detailed description of the purpose or the type of value being sought for that appraisal. And then there's the function. That is the function, or what we call the assigned use. For example, somebody wants to put this on their homeowner's policy. All right, so the purpose of that is for insurance coverage. All right, so the purpose of it, now what we're looking for here is replacement value new of this item in case it's lost, stolen, damaged, whatever it might be. That's so function, purpose, and function. Those are two key components of determining the type of appraisal that you're doing. The next part of that is it has to include the examination dates. Okay, what date did I actually examine those items, and where did I do it? Okay, so if I do it here in my office, I have to put that into the report. If I happen to do it like years ago, what I used to do, I actually used to go out to customers' homes and things like that, working just strictly as an independent appraiser at the time. So wherever I did that appraisal, I had to put that information in there. The other thing that has to go into it is the effective dates of the value. I arrived at this value on such and such a date from that time to the time that so you know the length of time, but when I examined it to when the report was completed. So that's very important, again, because if it's a long period of time, let's say there were many, many pieces that had to be done. And over this period of time of me if I spent a few weeks trying to get this done, was there any fluctuations in value over that period of time? So it has to reflect all of that stuff. The next part of that would also be, you have to give, as I mentioned earlier, which we all do, is give a complete detailed description of each item in that appraisal, unless you're doing it by lots. That goes back to the other question that you asked me. What if they had a whole bunch of pieces of jewelry? I can actually do that and take a different approach to that. I can, instead of stringing this out for hours and hours and hours with all these pieces of jewelry, I can say we can do this by lot, meaning you bring all these pieces in. I take a sampling of the different types of pieces of there and look at those items and look at how they're made, et cetera, and goes into those pieces, and then get a feel for each different piece of where they are in that market level, in that market price and all that. And then I can just describe the entire lot, generally what it contains, and here is the value for the entire lot, for the whole group. Okay, and from there, you would get a range of value in there. You would put a range of value. So that's another part of it. The next part of that is the report needs to be written in such a way that when the third party, such as me, yourself, okay, or third party being the insurance company, I should say, they're reading this, they get a picture in their mind based on what I have written in there, okay, without photographs. It has to be able to stand on its own without photographs, okay? It has to, all right?
So what happens if some of those pieces are, broken or chipped, like when you go through each one and then a person wants to do something with it, can you give them advice? Can
Yes.
this could be fixed, this,
Yes.
It's just worth whatever the value of?
Well, no, that's a very good question. And here's two things also. Here's one thing that I do also if somebody brings in a lot of pieces of jewelry. First thing I will do when I go through all these pieces of jewelry, I will tell them if there's items there, I will tell them, say, okay, you know what? These items that you have here, some of these things, I would not go through the time. Don't spend your money on having me evaluate these pieces because they don't meet a certain threshold. It's not worth you paying me time to do these items and put these on your policy, okay? And I always advise customers of that. I don't want them to put items out there. I'm not here just to be a cash cow or whatever and try to make the money off of that. So that's one thing. So going back to the point that you just brought up, what I do from there is, okay, you have an item here that has some damage to it, okay? Whether it's in the actual metal, the jewelry itself, or in the gemstones. And basically what happens from there is, okay, as I evaluate this piece, I'm writing these notes down where the damage is and this piece of jewelry. So what I'm going to do is when I arrive at the value, I'm arriving at the value of the item in place, okay? So replacement value new in its current condition. All right, so that will go in there. Then I will put some notes in there into that's saying this item can be repaired and it's going to cost X amount of dollars to have this item repaired. So the value in its current condition is X. The value of this item restored to its original condition is X. So now they get to decide which way they're going to go with this item. If they don't get it fixed, well, here's your value on that. If they do get it fixed, here's your value on that. So you're covered. They're covered on that. So that also goes into the appraisal. And again, the other thing, the methodology in the market analysis that I'm doing, that has to be in the appraisal also. Another key component is a statement by the appraiser, in this case, me, that I have no financial interest in this piece of property. But if I have a financial interest in it, let's say they bought the item from me, okay, and then it needs to be evaluated and everything, I must disclose that in the appraisal, that this item was purchased from me. This is the value. Okay, yeah, I sell it X amount right here. Here is the market value of this item. All right. So in other words, I'm doing that not to help them and also cover myself, that I'm not, and so the public knows, and I'm not inflating this. This is not being inflated. You'll see they'll know what they purchased it from me for, but now I'm going out into the market, my market level. Now, okay, I am a market level. I know what market level I am, and I know all the other jewelers that sell like, kind, and quality merchandise. Like, kind, and quality is very, very important. Okay, and then the other thing, the last thing that needs to go into it, and again, these are just minimums, is the appraiser's CV or their resume. You actually have to include your resume that has your education, your training in here, what you've done, where you've worked before. Very important to substantiate everything that I've written in that report and about myself, that I'm not just, oh, hocus pocus, I'm a personal property appraiser because I self-anointed myself. Oh, how about that? So no. So that's that part of it. The other part, okay, the flip side of that there are reasons not to accept an appraisal report.
Okay.
Those reasons are, one, okay, is all the things that I just mentioned previously. That's part of it right there. The other part is, if it's not signed, it's a legal document, don't accept it. Okay, walk away from that. If it's handwritten, don't accept it.
Okay.
Okay, do not accept it. All right. And part of the reason for that, you write, I write, we write differently. I may not be able to understand your handwriting, or it could be misinterpreted the way that you write your numbers. Okay. There's lots of things that can go wrong with a handwritten appraisal. So there's a reason right there not to do it. Okay. Another thing, not to accept an appraisal, if the fee is based on a contingency or upon the value of the personal property. And a good example of that is the fee is based on the percentage of the total value. That's illegal.
Okay.
Okay, that's illegal because you're robbing somebody. Again, the reason why I'm saying this as protection to the consumer is because, all right, let me inflate the value of this so I can make more money. Okay. There's the reason why you don't ever accept it on that principle alone. Okay, so the next thing is if it's outside the appraiser's area of expertise. And I can give an example on that. Let's say you came to me with something, here's a thing that I have no background in. Well, in my previous jeweler that I worked for, I did, but I've been out of that world for a long time. If it's watches, for example, okay, I deal in jewelry only. I don't do watches, okay? However, I can, based again, because of credentials and using research and methodology, I can write the majority of that report, using the same research and methodology, but when it comes to the value, I don't know the value because I'm not in that world anymore. So what I do is I would contact somebody, an expert in that arena, somebody that handles those watches on a daily basis, tell them what I have. Could you give me the value of these items or where they're selling in the marketplace, not just in your store, but give me the marketplace. They can tell me that. When I do that, that's acceptable now. I wrote the foundation of it. They gave me the value. Okay. And so from there, now what I'm going to do is I must include this other expert's information in that report. I have to include that in there. Okay. And so that's why all of these things are important, because you have to be able to, in the end, keep thinking legal document. It has to be able to be defended in a court of law. So part of my education and training at the very tail end of all of this right here is that I went through all of the core courses and the advanced courses of the ISA, and I took the courses also involved in how to be an expert witness in court.
Okay, let me ask you this. Mm-hmm. Have you ever had to do this personally? Well,
No, you mean go to court?
Yes.
I've never had, of all the appraisals I've done many, many appraisals in my career. I've never had to do it. But if I had to do it, I could step right in and I could do it because I know how to prepare for the court case. Mm-hmm. I've taught how to do that, how to prepare for the court case. But the thing also that a person needs to know in a case like that, what happens at that time, the appraiser, they have to be aware that the appraiser will have a specific fee for that, for going to court, and it's all based on the court's time and everything that has to be there, and it also based on my schedule. Say, for example, if you said I needed, your attorney wanted me to come to court, well, it's got to fit into my schedule, and it's going to be structured on my fee basis for me doing this work and to go in and preparing for this, to go to this court case. So it's going to be a different fee than what I would charge to do the actual appraisal.
Wow, this has really been interesting, very interesting. Never knew a lot of these things. I hope people that are watching this today are understanding a lot about it. I think we're almost ready to wrap up, but my other question, I guess, would be just to the average person doing an appraisal, could you recommend what a good fee, what a decent fee, what a high fee, what a low fee, just for an initial consultation might be for anybody going anywhere?
You mean for myself or out there in the general
public? No, just in the industry, in your...
Well, okay, if you're talking about, let's say, a jeweler, mm-hmm. Okay, not an appraiser, but a jeweler, mm-hmm. Okay, mm-hmm. They all charge differently. Everybody charges different. I've worked for, the first 15 years of my career, I worked for other jewelers before I started my own mm-hmm. business. Mm-hmm. Or actually, I think it was 13 years. But anyway, I worked for others, and they all had a different approach. Every one of them had a different approach on how they were going to charge. So for me to tell you, they would actually have to either call or visit the store. And
so most people would give that information upon request. So if you called and said you need an appraisal of 2 rings, they could give you some kind of information. Sure. The door.
Say, for example,
got more details.
Like I said previously, maybe they might say, okay, let's just say that they were going to do one item. Okay, let's mm-hmm. just say they were going to do one item, and they say, okay, well, based on, here's the thing, and why I charge by the hour as opposed by the item. All right, mm-hmm. Because of the complexity of the item. If you came to me and you had we'll go back to the Tiffany ring. So that's a mm-hmm. diamond solitaire. Okay, I know how much time it's going to take me between the research and everything else to do it. And I know that's a pretty straightforward type of thing. And that's going to take me minimal time pretty much to research the value of that item. But then let's say that you have a ring that has, let's say you have a couple of really nice big diamonds in the middle, and then you got some colored gemstones and more diamonds and all this. All those have to be graded out. They all have to be graded. Okay, so you're talking about time. All right, so a jeweler might look at that and say, okay, maybe I'll charge this person, let's just say $100 to do this item. All right, maybe to do this one item. Oh, now they bring me several pieces of items. So some of them will say, okay, well, I'll charge you $100 for this one, but because you have all these other ones, each additional one up to this many, maybe the next 3 or 4, I'll charge them at, say, 2/3 of that. All right, and then if you have more than X amount, then that part there, I'll charge for even less. Okay,
So you should know going into it kind of what to expect.
Yeah, that's because, like I said, there's a big difference between having one or two items, having a bunch of items. And again, every jeweler does it different. Everybody has their own way of doing it. And there's nothing right or wrong about doing either one of them. And that's why I say mine is based on time, because what you're going to get in the time that I do that, the evaluation is the same across the board. Some are going to take longer, some are going to take less amount of time. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to give my best assessment too, once I give somebody an idea how much I'm going to charge on it. And I'm working for them. And I'm not trying to rack up hours. That's not what I'm trying to do when I do these things, because I would like to be done with it as quickly as possible too, because that's not the only thing I have to work on.
Right.
Okay? So I want to be able to move on too, but I want to do my job right. Because again,
now, what about jewelry, say that, different things come in and out of fashion. They had the XO bracelet, things that that you bought from not a brand name jewelry store, maybe came from Sears or Penny's, or, do people get things like that inspected, or do you just kind of, what you paid for it? And
when they bring in again, see here's where questions, an appraiser really has to ask a lot of questions. Okay, but when they bring something in like that, on many occasions I can determine right away, and I can say, you know what, this is not worth your money, the time for me to appraise this item. I would rather not do it, and I don't think it's necessary for you. I would say to you, don't put this, don't get a detailed appraisal on this. You could, if you have a blanket coverage under, for a certain dollar amount with your jewelry, as long as you don't exceed that with the total sum of the jewelry that you have, don't even bother doing the appraisal on this one. These are the ones you should concentrate on. These are the ones don't bother doing the appraisal for, because it's not worth it. And honestly, again, as a time saver, I would prefer not to do it, because I'm not trying to take money from somebody for something that I don't think that they should be doing this for.
Sure.
Okay? And so, because there's 3 areas that I work in, and part of it, you just kind of opened up the door to another area that I work in. I have 3 major areas in appraisals that I work in. One of them, of course, is the insurance, which we already talked about. A huge area that I work in because of, again, the education, the training, and my background and everything. Working with estate settlements and things like that for distribution of assets. People sometimes inherit jewelry from a loved one that has passed away. They inherit all this jewelry. They don't want it. Nobody in the family wants it. Okay, they don't know what to do with it, but they need it evaluated. Okay, to determine, because sometimes they might want to cherry pick some of the nice ones and then get rid of the rest of them. So I work in that area right there with estate settlements, and that's, by the way, that's a different market altogether than doing the insurance. Okay, a little bit different methodology. Some things are the same, some are different. Then the third area that I specialize in is resale. They have an item of jewelry that they have. They don't want it. It's not their style or anything, but they don't want to just, get rid of it. They don't want to just give it away because it's worth something. So basically a resale appraisal, again, where we start out, again, a different valuation, because resale is now where if you went to buy a piece of jewelry brand new out of a jewelry store, you're in your primary market. You're in the top level, okay, at market level, okay, brand new retail. This one, they have this piece that they don't want, they want to get rid of. It's now it's a used piece of item. It's just like buying a brand new car. You drive it off the lot, the value just went down. It's the same thing with a piece of jewelry. It's no different, okay? But now they have this used item of jewelry, even if it's in excellent condition. It's a used piece of jewelry. You're in the secondary market. Now I know what market level I'm starting out over here. It's not going to command the same price. I don't care what condition it is, as a brand new item coming from a jewelry store. So those are the 3 main areas that I chose to concentrate on with the appraisals.
Wow, you do a lot, Dan. You really do. This is really great. I think people really are going to get a lot from it. So thank you for doing this for us today, Dan Balboni from Dan Balboni Custom Jewelers. And hope everyone enjoyed it. There's always books in the library on jewelry. I'm sure we can find you some things on appraisals too. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today, and have a great day. Thank you. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you. All right. Thank you for inviting me.